Hello, everybody. I'm Jeremy Bloom, the CEO and founder of Integrate, and welcome to Game Changers. I'm super excited to have a really good friend of mine, somebody I've known a bunch of years, somebody I look up to, somebody I've learned a lot from, a good friend of Integrate, Apolo Ohno, the most prolific winter Olympian of all time in the history of the United States as a speed skater, 8-time Olympic medalist, and really exceptional guy. Thanks for joining us, Apollo. I thought we could start off on just how unpredictable these past 18 to 20 months have been. You commonly talk about your sport and speed skating as wild, unpredictable, and volatile. Pretty similar to the times that we've all been operating in during COVID. I'm curious, like, how do you think about navigating uncertainty and performing under circumstances where there's just a lot of unknowns?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeremy. And again, like great to see you and great to see everyone who's here. As the Integrate family is a group that is high performers, high achievers, and we've had kind of open, transparent conversations around change and around uncertainty, how to navigate through some of these turbulent times, especially when we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what it was like 18 months ago. I remember going for a run in the middle of Los Angeles and not seeing a single car for a 40-minute run, which is very unlike Los Angeles. Anyone who's ever spent time there.
For sure.
Um, and so, the silver lining was that the air was beautiful and clean, but it was also a very eerie, almost like vanilla sky moment, so to speak, as like Tom Cruise is running down the middle of New York City and not seeing a single soul, or Will Smith in Legend when he's just driving around the city that seems like it's in, kind of post-apocalyptic times. So these films are the reason why I tell you that is these films and conditions and books that we've read for years have kind of started to condition our own self into these are uncertain, these are fearful, and we are naturally always going to go towards a state of not only fear, but also feeling unsafe. And that typically comes when we reach an environment that is not familiar to us, that we don't see similarities and we don't see the routine that we're normally used to going through. We are conditioned as human beings to always seek a state of safety. Now, as we know, growth and personal growth and going beyond your previous conceived expectations for yourself or even limitations requires you to stretch beyond into the realm that is the uncertain or perhaps at least unfamiliar. And that's the hard part. So, short track speed skating, the Olympic path, all of these things are deeply rooted in uncertainty. I think that the greater that you go with velocity towards that particular topic, whether it's in your career, a new career change, or a new identity, the more aggressive and more momentum that you can actually build creates this velocity of force that's much harder to slow down, right? So think it was like you're bicycling down a hill, and at some point you're going to hit this massive uphill, and you need to make sure you have enough velocity behind those wheels that you can continuously keep churning when it gets really, really hard. The other part about short track speed skating that is really unique is the fact that we train a lifetime, perhaps 10 years for a race that lasts 40 seconds long. And I think in your case, even
22
sometimes as much
seconds.
22 seconds. And so the likelihood of someone of succeeding and being perfect on that day is actually minuscule. And therefore, we need to switch our mindset to being so married and tied and almost handcuffed to the result that we're seeking while somehow forgetting about the process that is actually required for us to get there. And so I think about this a little bit more mechanically in terms of if this is a 4-year cycle, the incremental gains that I do each week or each month or each quarter with my micro teams, my pods, or whatever else organization that I'm working with, that's really imperative for us to seek to see those types of gains and incremental improvements. We may not be able to see them right away because they're small, but compounded over time and consistently, that's when we start to shift from what we used to do into what is moving forward today. So combining all of that kind of jumbling conversation of the past 18 months has been uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty existing inside of our own climate, whether it's political instability, whether it's the polarization of beliefs and which side do you lean on, and if you're not with me, you're against me. All of that to me if you can zoom out, is noise. And it's noise because it distracts you from ultimately reaching what you truly want and what you deserve and what you desire. And so anything else that doesn't fit in the realm of, okay, I know that I can't entirely control the outcome. I'm now into this new environment that feels like I'm getting a little bit stretched thin. I feel uncomfortable. I have the butterflies in my stomach. Nothing seems like it makes sense. At those times, disengaging for a second, assessing and recalibrating where you are, and then recognizing that you need to get back in the game, so to speak, and engage with the same type of mindset to know that the journey is never easy. So these topics I can talk about for months on end, mainly because uncertainty is a part of life. That's a part of what happens. And we typically don't even know what we're made of until sometimes our back is against the wall. And then we've been fighting and fighting and fighting until we turn around and realize there's been a ladder there the entire time. And that's when we begin to climb.
Yeah, I love how you brought up, 40 seconds in speed skiing, 22 seconds in the sport of freestyle skiing. We, as Olympic athletes, work our entire lives for a very short period of time. And that's a good transition into the topic of mindset and pressure. When I think about the Olympics that you came into, especially your last two, Torino and Vancouver, you were the favorite and you had the biggest spotlight. It's hard enough to be an Olympian and to compete under those circumstances. It's even harder to be the guy. And I love when I hear you say the difference in your sport between first and fourth is that. And so when you add up all that pressure that you felt, the spotlight that was on Apolo Ohno, and the difference between first and last, how did you train your mind? And what was the mindset going in to be able to perform at your highest level under really difficult circumstances?
Well, I think we first started to reverse engineer where I'd like to be. So if the end result and goal was X, we knew that I couldn't only solely focus on the result of winning gold, making the podium, being and getting another Olympic medal. Instead, we wanted to say, what are some actual quantitative metrics that I can measure and then reverse engineer back from that period of time to land at where we are today. And then really, truly start practicing and my own categorization of self-inventory, which means looking into the mirror, having the cold, kind of honest, radically transparent conversation of where are you today? So first comes what I would call acceptance, right? So a lot of us, very difficult to have self-acceptance. We're very hypercritical. Sometimes we don't like what we see in the mirror amidst our flaws and insecurities and self-doubts and shortcomings, et cetera. But a part of the process of realizing and recognizing and actually, I wouldn't say validating, but at least saying out loud those things is that you come to terms and you surrender to what that is today, who you are today, because you can't change that, right? Once you come to terms with that person and accepting that person, that it's fine to be that person who you are today, and it's made up those things. I'm saying this because this is what I did during my process. From there, I began to take out the metaphysical kind of stone and the ice pick and chisel away at myself to begin effectively saying, okay, I am what I was, but I don't have to be there. I can choose to continue down a new path. And a part of that new path, Jeremy, was really radical. I had a blueprint for success that was seemingly very, very accurate, and it seemed to work often. But the sport was changing. Tech was being implemented into the sport at a rate that we weren't sure we hadn't seen in the past 10 years previously. And the actual genetic makeup of the athletes looked entirely different than those that competed at the previous three Olympic Games. So we all have our natural disposition of how we walk, how we train, the certain cadence and rhythm at which we jog or ride a bike. And I wanted to change that. And that only came when I decided to say, okay, I need to really make some radical changes. And that meant taking some risk. And by risk, meaning going against the grain, trying and reinventing the entire way which we thought about nutrition, thought about training, thought about sleep, and also my mindset around each particular day and training session. So, in sports, we often talk about like balance, right? Making sure you have a good balance so you're mentally healthy and you've got a good kind of relationship with your family. In full transparency, there was zero balance in my life during those years.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I could have probably done the things that I've done if I didn't lean on a lot of those call them micro traumas that allowed me to propel myself in a way. And we all have them, right? Sometimes they're insecurity, or mine was really a significant fear of failure. And you wrote, by the way, an amazing book called Fueled by Failure. And I think that when we think about those things, they can either be paralyzing to us, these things that have happened to us, maybe in childhood, through relationships, through jobs, through people, family, or we can turn them into catalysts to lean on as levers to propel us and metabolize those failures or those shortcomings into a new beginning of, this is what I want to do and this is how I want to go about that. So that's what we did. We made a list of not an almond more, not an almond less in terms of my nutrition. We went catabolic, meaning my body was eating itself every single night because I was trying to strip away all of the excess upper body mass. I dropped from 165 body weight down to 142 over the span of 3 Olympic Games. And we did so with—
And you got stronger.
And I got significantly stronger. So we started researching this thesis around neuromuscular recruitment, which effectively, when we talk about going to the gym, without getting too technical, we think about muscular recruitment as hypertrophy, which means you tear the muscle down and it rebuilds, building more muscle fibers. Neuromuscular recruitment means you activate the dormant muscle fibers that are surrounding particular tissue and area of your body that typically only get activated under significant duress, chaos, or fear, i.e. severe consequence of getting hurt, picking someone up from underneath a car that you hear about someone lifting a car to do so, right? These things are contained with us. And I think it's like type 2 cross-C muscle fiber, something like that. And so we tried to train that mechanism time and time again. And to train that mechanism, by the way, is really hard because first you need to fatigue the muscle so much, and then you need to put the muscle under duration. So imagine, like, in short track speed skating, every corner that we pull, we have about 2.7, almost 3 G-forces on one leg around each corner as we're doing this hard pivot, right? So that's like a 500-pound one-legged squat. So what we would do is we would fatigue the muscle significantly under a 1,000 or a 1,500-pound leg press, and we would do reps with that weight, and then immediately after, put a weight vest on and do repeated plyometrics, holding weights in each arm. And that's what that's doing, is that's activating this kind of core, just call it like your inner core muscle fiber recruitment that forces the body to recruit all the smallest little muscle fibers around the tissue to do so. So that requires immense mental focus and fortitude, because an inch a little bit forward or back, you're going to get injured. But that's what we did. And that was the mentality that we stuck to for long, long periods of time. And look, there was many days, Jeremy, where I questioned the path. I was like, I do not know if this is right. I don't know if this is the right way to go. And I'm not sure that I want to go against the grain, because what used to be feels and sounds so much more comfortable.
Yeah.
That's the way I've always done things. And I have a predictable outcome associated. But the reality was, and the reality that I didn't want to come to, was that if I had stayed true to that old routine, the other team that I was competing against, they had that playbook. They knew exactly what I was going to do. So it's just like you playing football, and imagine they know exactly the route that you're going to run.
Yeah.
It's not going to end up very well.
Yeah.
So the only way to
the
do
Koreans
that is
knew your game plan, didn't they? I mean, they
were amazing.
They studied Apolo Ohno.
Yeah, they were amazing.
It was a great chess match. I just loved being an observer and watching that. You mentioned balance, and I think that's something that we all struggle with. Specifically, I think about kind of the balance of our own awareness of our own mental health, and balancing that with grit, tenacity, resiliency, which often are pushing against each other, right? They're on two different sides of the coin. Both are really needed and helpful, especially if for anybody who wants to achieve greatness. We saw something happen that I think is unprecedented at the last Olympics, when Simone Biles opted out of a lot of the events solely because she just mentally wasn't there. It's a growing dialogue in this country, which is a good thing, normalizing mental health and normalizing the fact that we all struggle at different periods of time, and that's okay. It doesn't make us weak as human beings. It's just a human quality that we all have. But I'm curious, like, it's also at conflict with a lot of the things that you and I learned growing up. You from your father and coaches, my from football coaches and ski coaches. It was like, you have to grit your way through really difficult situations and circumstances to become a world champion. How do you balance both?
It's a great question. It's a delicate question, and I'm not sure that we truly know what the answer is. I think when it comes to balance, though, what's happening that's really exciting in our country is that we are and we do have the opportunity to redefine what strength means. And so the condition that we had when we were fighting all kinds of wars, when we were conquering other countries and these things were happening, we were operating from a state of survival and also that we didn't have access to certain things. We have many of those things at our whim today. And so balance comes in the form of, I think, recognizing that first and foremost, what Simone Biles did was really hard. I mean, it's really hard to do that on the world stage. To be able to drop out like that is tough, and say that I'm prioritizing certain things in my life because I, as a human, believe that they are important. So there's kind of two mechanisms here that are happening, right? One is this external belief that someone else who we don't know should represent and act on our behalf of what we believe should be represented in sport. And that's understandable, right? That's how you've been brought up, and I get that. And then there's the other side that says, you don't know that person, you have no idea what that person has gone through, and you don't know how dangerous a sport can potentially be, perhaps paralyzing or debilitating in some capacity. And even beyond that, does it even really matter, right? Does it matter to you whether that person competes or does not? I'm not sure it affects the way that you live your life unless you allow it to. So the voice in your head is one that we often have to pay attention to. When it comes to balance as a whole, I think there is a delicate balance between knowing that the journey is not going to be easy and you do need to have grit. That is absolutely a critical piece of this. But also making and maintaining and making sure that you are having an open, healthy dialogue with yourself so it is not turning toxic. Because the internal toxic conversation that I think typically has had with our society and with at least my upbringing was that it doesn't even matter how poorly you feel. You are weak unless you complete the task. That's just how I was brought up. And so I think there is now a new way to have open conversations about this, to say, hey, you know what? I'm not having the best of days and I'm not feeling in the best way possible. And are there other alternative ways that which I can still reach the same goal? Or simply saying I'm human and I need to take a break. The edge is very sharp. And I think it's up to us to have an open dialogue and question around, you need to have kind of your personal board of directors of people. That can be 2 people, that can be 3 people, that can be 5 people, and operate your way in which those people have your best interests in mind. So they push you when you need to be pushed, but they also understand that you are a human being, regardless of the external expectations that are being placed upon you as an operator, as a leader, et cetera, or the internal ones as well. So again, the voice that you listen to in between your own 2 ears, you need to always be on watch of what that voice is saying to you. Now, everyone gets motivated by different things. Some people get motivated by almost negative connotations and associations. You can't do that. You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. You're not tall enough. You're not smart enough. And then someone will say, okay, I'm going to prove to that person that's not going to happen. Others respond really well to those that say, like, positive affirmation. Great job. You're working so hard. Excellent. I see what you did here. Very creative, right? Everyone works a little bit differently, but what you communicate to yourself is the most important of all. And so how you're motivating yourself, the reasons why you're doing these things are a big part of that. The one secret that I think that is perhaps not a secret is finding purpose in what you're doing. And so if there is no purpose in what you're doing, it's very easy to get involved in that toxic, negative self-talk versus saying to yourself, I know why I'm here. And I know the real purpose here could be my family. It could be this. It could be many other things that are ancillary on the outside. So I try to marry those things when I think about balance in a way that allows me to be human. I think if we want to zoom out even further, we can say, look, if you are someone who's grinding at your job or you're deep into sales or whatever that is, you are like a machine, but you're also human, and all humans need rest and recovery. So if you are an athlete, for you to make the best possible decisions and practices, enable yourself to be able to have these short sprints followed by these downtimes of rest and regeneration.
I double click on your comments around the inner dialogue because it's true. Like we often are our worst critics. We are harder on ourselves than anybody else. And I think that's pretty universally true. And I think, fine tuning the brain to the extent that you can, or at least working on it, to have positive thoughts and a positive spirit, I think is absolutely critical and key to a healthy mind. Final topic here, but you're coming out with a new book that's titled Hard Pivot, Embrace Change, Find Purpose, and Show Up Fully. You were kind enough to send me a preview of this book. It's absolutely fantastic. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's also very timely because a lot of folks at Game Changers are going through a hard pivot in their lives. More folks in corporate America are leaving not only their jobs, but often industries to kind of reinvent themselves and learn a new skill. At Integrate, we've hired over 150 people in the past 12 months. We have a lot of new folks who have decided to join us. Some came from marketing tech and others didn't. I love the title of the book. I love the concept. Like, leave us with like your thoughts and advice for those of us that are going through a hard pivot.
Oh, I love this topic because I love the process of reinvention, adaptation, and how to survive and then eventually thrive through levels of uncertainty. So the book that I wrote, Hard Pivot, was deeply embedded in this belief that we as Olympic athletes go through this first great divorce from our first identity. And that first identity is sport. It was my first true love. It was taught me everything. It gave me the ropes of like change and understood what discipline was. And I really wanted this book first and foremost to help people understand, not to say that my toolkit will work for you, but here's some experiences perhaps that you will find some similarity in, and what I found to be at least helpful in my world. And not everything in here will work for everyone, and that's totally fine. But we do know that establishing new habits is hard, right? Between 18 days up to almost 255 days to establish and or break a habit. So think about that for a second. It almost takes an entire year to establish a new habit. So there's no reason, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world why January 1st New Year's resolutions just simply don't work most of the time, because it takes the consistency of habit and getting a good start on a daily basis. I think reinvention to me, and I can articulate this now, Jeremy, because, you know, if you'd asked me when I was like 17, 18 years old, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I was just like a rambunctious kid who had raw talent for the sport and lots of energy. And I had guardrails and coaches to help kind of guide me as I pinballed my way towards the Olympic Games. When I retired, however, those guardrails went like this. They went flat. And now I had to be my own control mechanism to understand, how hard do I go? When do I let off? Am I going the right direction? Do I trust this person? And it spent a lot of time making a ton of mistakes and failing and falling on my face, and then learning that this is actually a part of the process. And so we've spoken about this before, but deeply rooted throughout the book are something called the 5 golden principles: gratitude, giving, grit, gearing up expectations, and then getting after it. So just go, basically just going and testing your thesis. Those things seem to be deeply moving and important as anyone's going through their own reinvention. But I think first and foremost, setting your intention is something that is like very easy, low-hanging fruit, right? And I think when we actively and proactively engage in setting our intention, whether that is at the start of our day, before a meeting, before we take on a new task, it effectively aligns yourself with what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And the second part of this is the gratitude part is also something that I think that many of us, perhaps we don't really use until we're faced with loss, severe circumstance, pain, suffering of some capacity. And then only then do we want things to go back to simplicity. I just want when things were simple, when they were less noisy, when I didn't want all this other stuff. And then after things kind of calm back down again, we get back into the realm and we're back to the hamster on the cage again. And so having this intention mixed with having that practice of gratitude, and then just setting these standards for yourself, right? Having the inner dialogue is really important, and being open, whether that's with yourself in your journal, whether that's with a loved one. Reinvention is something that is a critical piece to being human. Every single person on the planet will have to go through it. And it's not supposed to be easy, because you're leaving your old skin behind as you shed and you're beginning anew. And when you begin anew, You don't know what's happening. You're unfamiliar. The environment is uncertain. You feel like maybe you're too old for what you're trying to accomplish. It's all noise. All that is noise. These are all things that are telling you to go back to what was, to go back to that first original self that is the original blueprint, and say to yourself, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like that is always going to try to pull you back. And I'm telling you, 11 years, almost 12 years, dude, that I have been retired, right? And I'm now always having these conversations where I still find myself at times, and by the way, I've gotten better at it, but I still find myself at times wanting to go back to what was because it's so familiar. I have so much conditioning there. But I think what we do when we set these intentional practices on a daily basis, and then we surround ourselves with people who also want to have that same type of capacity for growth, what it does is it keeps you accountable. It sets the cadence in which you need to operate, and you start to truck along further and further and further. And so those guardrails start to build back up again. And that's from discipline, that's from your routine, that's from your practice, that's from your loved ones, that's from the integrate individuals, right, that are around you. All these things can be shaped in a way to funnel you towards the goal that you want to go towards. But it's not easy. So embrace that it's not easy. Stop focusing so much on the prize. You will get there. And if you don't, you will have to surrender to that outcome in some capacity. But the process to get there is where all of us should be spending every waking moment and ounce of energy on. And a part of that process is also letting off the gas, allowing yourself to be human.
And take a breath and relax and get off the goal treadmill for a second, which is hard for some of us to do. But listen, Apolo, on behalf of all of us at Integrate, our presenting sponsor, LinkedIn, and everybody at Game Changers, thank you. We're grateful to you for stopping by to share just a glimpse of your wisdom and your truly remarkable journey on this planet so far, and you're just getting started. So thanks again. It's great to see you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.